Well, this is our last session of the day, and we like to kind of gear this session so we can have some time for sharing. And also, it's a little lighter. We've gone through some pretty heavy material today. And this is a little lighter, and then we can talk about grief being fun, but there's some things that we can learn from our loved ones in this segment, that we can laugh and share some of the signs that we do get. If everybody's familiar with signs, obviously this is about signs that I believe that our loved ones live on in existence beyond this one. That their physical body dies, but they survive on another existence that we have to tap into and recognize. But it's looking at a whole different perspective again. To look and feel and hear signs, and to be able to not talk yourself out of them, that you're crazy. But here we are on mini planet grief, where everything's okay, what we're talking about. We can talk without shame, without embarrassment, about our loved one, about our signs. The signs that I've heard from people come from all walks of life, from somebody with no education to the highest to a PhD, from any country, from all across the board, people experience signs. Most of the time they don't talk about it back in the real world with the fortunate others because they think we're crazy and that we're just striving so much for a touch of our loved one. Well, aren't we? Yes, we want to know that they exist. And they can give us signs in just different ways. And a lot of people don't get them and feel frustrated why they're not getting them. A lot of moms don't get them early on. I'm not sure. I've talked to a lot of different moms that just don't get them, but they come to a sister, they come to an aunt, they come to a 5-year-old child. Children under 5 are huge in getting signs because they're still the innocence. They're still close to our maker, and they have 5 years. They haven't built up the walls that we build up. You hear about kids, we grow up, you hear about kids having invisible friends. And we, oh, yeah, right. I used to do the, oh, yeah, right stuff too. Now I firmly believe they're not talking to invisible friends. They're talking to spirit. There's been little kids that have talked about seeing a grandfather that comes and talks to them. Have never seen the grandfather, then they see a photo in a book, goes, that's the guy that comes to me in my dreams. That's the guy I talk to. These are honest children telling their stories. And that's why I call this Whispers of Love, for 2 reasons. One, because we're relegated to whisper about it because people think we're nuts. 2, they come as silent as a whisper. They can be very, very subtle. And we seek for signs because we're in pain. And we want to know that they survived death on some level, that they're still around us. Their love is still more than just in our heart, that they're actually in another existence somewhere. And my first experience that made me think that this was a reality when I was 15 years old. And my dad died, and I know he came to me in a dream for a week. He had triple bypass surgery, died on the table. And I had this dream that he would come to me and say, Mom, my dad's coming to me. He comes home, shakes his boots off like he did every day, goes, lays on the couch, takes his shirt off, lays in his underwear, and cracks open a beer. And he's got this big scar on his chest. And I said, Dad, what are you doing? You're here. You're dead. He said, I'm just home to watch you for a while. And that happened for about a week. And I would tell my mom, and she said, oh, honey, you're just a dream. So I just put it away as just being a dream. Not until years later did I go back and realize that I really think my father was comforting me and visiting me. Because he had a cactus in a house. He had a big Christmas cactus that blooms at Christmas time. And we had this huge Christmas cactus. My dad had one job besides going to work. That was to take the Christmas cactus in and out of the house. This is Minnesota. You just can't leave them blooming outside. So every fall, my dad would take the Christmas cactus, bring it in the house, put it in the house, and then it would bloom profusely at Christmas. Then in the spring, he would take it out, put it on the north end of the house, and leave it out there all summer. So then he died. I was the man of the family, as my mother told me. And fall comes, and I go, I guess it's my turn to take the Christmas cactus back in the house. So I brought the Christmas cactus back in the house so it wouldn't freeze for the winter. Brought it in that Christmas. Not one single bloom. I said, in my 15-year-old mind, is it possible this plant is grieving for my father? The plant had been planted by my grandmother when she was pregnant with my dad. So he had that plant. We all of our family members have a sprig of that plant that we've We rooted and cut. So we all have that Christmas cactus. The original finally died, but at that year where it didn't bloom, then it was time to bring it outside for the summer. And so I said, I'm not going to put it. I said, if this thing's not blooming, sorry, Dad, it's going to join you. I don't care. So I took it out to the cemetery, and I put it on his grave. I said, okay, you're on your own, cactus. If somebody waters you, whatever, you're with Dad, because you're not blooming for us. So stayed out there all summer long at this. And this is a Native American cemetery. We lived on a small island in the Mississippi, and so I could still be buried there for nothing. It was just community graveyard, which cost nothing, and there's no fences, there's no one taking care of it, so no one was going to be watering this cactus. But anyway, I went out there again in the fall, and it was still growing, and it survived the summer, and brought it into the house. And that Christmas, you could not see any green on it. It was so filled with beautiful blooms. It was thick. And that was my first thought, I wonder if Dad's saying, yes, you brought it out to the grave, and it was like him communicating to me. So that was my first sign. Because as I was growing up, you grow up fast after 15 years old, and I got married, and blah, blah. I don't worry about signs. I didn't have any other serious deaths in my life until my brother and whatnot. But it was when my son died that I said, Kelly, I said, give me a sign. I want a sign. I wrote him a letter, my book, Letters to My Son. It started off me with writing one letter to him. I said, Kelly, I think you've survived death, and I want to know that you survived death. So give me something growing in the yard that I'll know it's you. And we just bought a new house, and I'm going to be checking. And so I wanted the billboard. I just didn't want to find a penny on the street. And so I asked him specifically. And I'm going to share that sign later, because that's one of the best signs, and I have a slide of it. But I'll explain a little bit more in detail. But that just rocked my world when he gave me the sign. He answered my request, specifically answered my request. And then I knew that he survived death. And that helped me process the grief the rest of my life, that I know he survived. So long story today, Whispers of Love. And doing this presentation for so many people, and starting off in Portland, and in Nashville, it was huge. 800 people came to it in Nashville. Because people want to be validated. They want to be validated. This is real. They're not crazy. And we have sharing sessions at the Compassionate Friends when we have the national conference. I do this workshop for an hour. Then we have a sharing session in the evening so that we can share, because there's no time for Q&A when you've got 400 people in a room. So we have a sharing session in the evening at 9 o'clock. Every one of these, the last conference, this went until 1:30 in the morning. 250 or 200 people sitting in a room telling their stories, one after the other, for 4 hours. Everybody's got a story. And so a lot of people have shared their stories with me, shared pictures and anecdotals, and I put them all together in the slideshow to show to you so that you can validate your own and get some ideas. If you're not getting signs, maybe this will open up some avenues for you. Because once your loved one realizes you know what the sign is, it opens the door, and they can start communicating more. And if you're not getting signs at all, be patient. And the important part of the Whispers of Love, too, is to spread the news. Tell people. What can hurt us any more than losing our loved one? So if they think we're crazy, so be it. But they may be getting signs, and they're afraid to come to you and say, I got a dream about your son who died, or a dream about your husband. They're not going to come to you because they want to bring you down. But if you tell them, I want a sign so bad, that maybe if they get a sign, they'll come and talk to you about it. So it's opening the door, letting other people, because some people just like some people are artists, some people are musicians, some people are more intuitive, some people are not, and it's just hard to get in. And it's hard to change our philosophy and talk ourselves out of it. Oh, that's not a sign, that's not a sign. So we continually talk ourselves out of it. And so that's just going to go through these. There's 3 different scenarios where signs can occur. That's prior to death, during the dying process, and after the death has occurred. And I've experienced all of these at some level with my family members who have passed. Prior to death, you can have a dream, a portent dream, where like Carla Broy wrote a book, Dreaming Kevin. She had a dream that her son was going to die, and on a bicycle. And he went out zooming out of his bicycle one morning, and she goes, "Oh my God, I had that dream. I got to stop him." And he went out in front of the house and got killed on a bicycle. Not that it could have prevented it. And I don't think that's the issue. It lets you know ahead of time in a subtle way that maybe on some level, unconscious, spiritual level, they know of their impending death. And that is the prior to death indicators. And a lot of people have shared being taken. A lot of people talk about after death, where you're finding a penny or a butterfly, and we'll share those. But the prior to death dreams can come in different ways, in letters, and well, there's one woman just wrote me a letter now that her son had come back from service. He had died, and he always sent letters to them. And they lived, this is 5 years later after he had died. And he went down to the neighbor's house to talk to the neighbor because just one of his friends are in their garage talking, in the garage, like guys do in their man cave. You're out there in the garage having a beer talking, and looks up, and he sees up on the header of the garage door that was open that there was a piece of paper, looked like a corner of a letter. And their house is 5 blocks down. But their numbers, if you're dyslexic, they would get mail because the numbers were switched around. It would be almost the same address except the number. So they'd often get they'd get mail back and forth and give each other and say, oh, I got your mail again. And so anyway, this is 5 years after his death. And they looked up and they see this piece of paper. And they look up and they, what is that? And they gripped it down. It was a letter from his son from the service, and just talking about being overseas. But if you read it, it's like he was talking about being in a whole other place. I miss you, I love you, I know it's not easy for you, me being gone. And it was just, and so it's laid up in wait for all that time for the right synchronistic event. The synchronicity, the timing when these things happen, it's so powerful. And a lot of times they happen on the timing is the date. It is the birth date, it's the angelversary date. It's a very significant date that these signs come. And that's the synchronistic event. The synchronicity is the timing. And during the dying process, seeing angels, seeing dead relatives, speaking with others who've died, hearing a religious figure call your name, or seeing a religious figure. I've had experience with my son. Well, it's after the death has occurred, too. I'll get back to that. After the death, this is what most people are familiar with. And you've heard the term maybe ADC, after-death communication. And that's just the after-death type, where visible signs that they're out there, that you find a penny, you see a butterfly, you see a hawk at the funeral going above, or a dove landing at your windowsill, or a bird. A lot of animals, a lot of insects, ladybugs, dragonflies. But it's still, again, the synchronistic event always weaves itself in. The near-death experience. This is the closest thing we can get to death that people have come back and told us what it's like to die. My son had surgery for his brain tumor. He had a medulloblastoma at the base of the spine, base of the head, the medulla oblongata. Removing it, they could as much as they could, then they'd have to do chemotherapy and radiation. While they're removing it, they took as much as they could, 2/3 of it, and his heart stopped because that controls the heart center and the breathing, and they got him going again. He had it intubated for a week. When he came out, he's 9 years old, and when he came out of the intubation was pulled out, he could talk again. He said, "Dad, you won't believe it. I left my body. I saw the surgery." We said, "What?" I said, "What? This is like National Enquirer. What?" He said, "Yes, I just kind of floated up, and I was in the ceiling." And he described all the nurses and the doctors in the room. And I said, "Well, what else? What else did you feel?" He said, "I was just up there for a little bit, but," he goes, "I was holding hands with Jesus. And Jesus said, 'Kelly, you will be well.'" So we took that as wow, we're going to beat this thing. He's seeing Jesus. And I say, we're not getting into religion here in a public community, but I'm just telling the story of a 9-year-old boy, is what he saw. And believe me, I grew up a very lukewarm Catholic, so he didn't get it from me. I was not a Bible thumper. I believe, but I say, when he said this, I was, "Whoa, Kelly, you listened to Bible school more than I ever thought you did." But he described it, and I said, "Well, Kelly, what did Jesus look like?" He said, "Well, half Nelson." I go, "Who's half Nelson?" "My Garbage Pail Kid cards." Anybody here Garbage Pail Kid cards? Back when he was sick, Kelly was sick. That was back in 1987, 85 to 87. And back then, Cabbage Patch dolls were huge. So my daughter had a Cabbage Patch doll, and my son loved Garbage Pail Kid cards because they're gross parodies of the same type of a doll. Only they're messy Tessie, snotty Lottie, pimply Pammy. They're just gross. And for a 9-year-old boy, he loved them. He would categorize them. Every time I'd go to the 7-Eleven on Monday morning when they had the delivery of the truck, and I would buy the whole case of Garbage Pail Kid cards and give them to Kelly. And so he would go through them and categorize them. He'd spend hours categorizing them, putting them in boxes. And we have the full first 9 series in pristine shape in a box, except for Half Nelson. Because I had to go look for Half Nelson. I got home, I said, Kel, I got to go look and see who Half Nelson looks like. So I get to know what Jesus looked like without actually going to meet him. There he is. Half Nelson. And when I looked at that and I said, I think in the broader spiritual understanding, that soul is anima and animus, the yin and the yang. It is our body that defines our gender, not our soul. I think our soul is genderless. It is pure spirit. So he's seeing pure spirit, the strength, the sensitivity, the whole ball of wax in one. In a 9-year-old, he describing pure spirit. And I also work for the Catholic Church, and I showed this to Father Jim. I said, what do you think? So what do you think? So this, I said, he goes, well, it's really not the Renaissance version I'm used to, but I understand. The peaceful transition in the moment of death. Now, my mother, I was with my mother. I was with my son when he died. I was with my mother when she died. I was with my grandmother when she died. And so when I was sitting there with my mother, and she was not a believer. And she said, why are you believing all this stuff, all this afterlife stuff and these signs and everything? Why are you doing all this? Why are you torturing yourself? And she goes, there's nothing out there. She goes, I go to church to play bridge. There's nothing out there. It's a community. When you're dead, you're gone. You're in the ground. It's over when it's over. And when she's dying, my wife is there, my sister, my daughter's with her, and all of a sudden she was chain soaking the breathing toward the end, and she just stopped, and she woke up, and her eyes opened up, and she said, "No, Grandma, I can't wait to get your cherry pie again." My daughter goes, "Who in the hell is she talking to?" I said, I think even though she doesn't believe, I think that our spirit, the grandparents are coming to get her. The Native Americans fully believe that all the spirits will come to greet you and bring you across and safely journey you home. So I believe that happens. And I saw it in my son. The peaceful transition in his eyes when my son died, I knew he was seeing something beyond. And when my grandmother died, she had the same feeling. She just felt, I'm going to the gates. And she just knew she was going. This is my son, Kelly. This is shortly before he died. Always had his thumbs up. He always had a positive attitude. This little boy looks like a lot of my son. His name is Tyler Harker. I was doing a workshop like this in a small town in Minnesota called Owatonna. And they had put that I was coming to town in their newspaper. So it was a Compassionate Friends, mostly for bereaved parents. It was a Compassionate Friend group. But some people from the community came in because they read the newspaper. They said, Mitch Carmody's coming to town. Evidently, nothing much happens in Owatonna. Because some people came from the community, some chaplains, and I have people go around the room. Okay, what is your child's name and how old are you in grief years? How long has it been since your loss?